interested in sports dietetics, think you might want to be a sports dietitian, or are wondering what a sports dietetic internship looks like, you're in the right place. I just finished my dietetic internship for the University of Alabama sports dietitians at UA Athletics. I'm studying to become a dietitian, and here's everything that I learned about becoming a sports dietitian and what it's actually like. So first of all, let's talk sports, okay? I think one thing that's really important in this field is that you kind of have to be interested in sports and some type of competition. And that doesn't mean that it has to be football. It can be any type of sports, but I feel like you do have to have some interest. And guys, I was so excited for this dietetic internship. I can't even tell you. If you know me, then you know that I am literally a massive Alabama athletics fan. Alabama football is like number one in my heart. Like, I love Alabama football. I grew up watching the games every single Saturday. I grew up going to games, and like fall season, being a student at the University of Alabama, like every time I feel like I'm in heaven. I feel like I'm just the luckiest girl in the world. So to get to actually go to the athletic facilities and see the behind the scenes was so incredibly epic, and I loved it. But I do think that I probably got a little bit more out of the experience, not only because I am interested in sports and understand a lot of sports, but also because I'm specifically interested in Alabama sports. And it probably would have been a little bit different if I went to a facility at another university. And for this video, I would love to show you my own footage, but I did not take any because I was expressly told that I was not supposed to take any pictures or videos, which is totally fine. So I was literally just in the moment every single day. So if I show any clips, it'll just be something that's already on the internet. So far in my dietetic internships, I've already done 2 food service rotations. I've done 1/2 of my clinical rotation. I've done 1 community rotation already, which was like in like the local food banks and food pantries, and I've done a long-term care rotation. So this was technically supposed to be my 2nd community rotation, but my population was technically athletes, which is really kind of rare and not often in a dietetic internship. Usually this would be labeled like a sports internship, which is basically the experience that I got. And this was really cool because not only did I get to see the dietitians and what they do every day in their day-to-day lives and how things work at UA Athletics, I also got to hear about the experiences of what they did at their other previous universities and on different sports teams, because it kind of gave me a really good overall picture of just what it's like to be a sports dietitian and how you get there, that was out of the context of just the specific facility that I was at. So let's talk about the setup of like how it worked there, because I worked with multiple different dietitians, but not all schools and not all facilities have multiple dietitians. And how it worked at UA Athletics was that each dietitian had their own set of teams and nobody overlapped. Like, no 2 dietitians were working on the same team unless it was football, because football is such a large team, especially here. We're one of the best in the SEC. In my opinion, we are the best in the SEC, but everybody had different teams that they were working on and that they were specifically responsible for. And I learned that at most schools, it's basically split into like Olympic versus non-Olympic sports. And so I didn't know what that means, but it's kind of obvious because it's things that you would see at the Olympics versus not. And usually football is going to be number 1 on the list of things that you're not going to see in the Olympics. And apparently at other smaller schools, there might be like 1 dietitian that does all of the Olympic sports, which is just insane, especially after seeing like how much time and dedication and effort they put into each of their teams. Like, Alabama is such a big sports school, and we have so many different sports that are so involved that it would just be impossible for one person to do that, and which made it really cool, honestly, to see all the different dietitians working, though it would be interesting to see that other perspective as well. And it is pretty much the same that generally at other schools, it sounds like football dietitians are just football dietitians, and football usually has their own dietitian or dietitians, which we have multiple here at UA, and so that was also really interesting. But it makes sense because football is such a large program. So now that we talked about kind of what the setup looks like and like how the dietitians kind of split their duties, let's talk about what their responsibilities are. What are the responsibilities of a sports dietitian? What are they doing on a weekly basis? What are they responsible for in their job? Kind of what would the job description be? And I'll tell you, a lot of things go under this category because they are busy people who have to do a lot of different things. Basically, the overarching theme of their responsibilities is that they have responsibilities to the athletes to help them perform their absolute best and educate them on how to fuel themselves the best best to perform how they want to be performing. Part of this is planning and ordering snacks for them to have before their practices, during practices, and post-practice, as well as before, during, and after competitions. It's also going to mean actually giving team educations to the whole team about the types of foods that they want to be eating at the different stages of their training. So actually giving them the tools that they need and explaining to them what they want their plate to look like, how they want to be eating, whether they are kind of like off season right now, whether they're on season, coming up on a competition, and actually explaining that to them. And these nutrition educations can be about pretty much anything nutrition related. It could be about hydration, it could be about gut health, it could be about eating enough, or like I said, how to create that perfect plate that they're looking for. Also, along with team education, sports dietitians can give individual counseling to individual athletes. And this is usually going to be if a specific athlete is taking an interest in kind of like helping their performance via nutrition, then they might come to the sports dietitian and be like, hey, I would love to set up a counseling session with you or a few counseling sessions until I meet this goal. And the dietitian could give them as little or as much help as they need, anywhere from giving them a gist of ideas of what they want to be eating to planning out a specific meal plan for them, whatever the athlete needs and whatever the dietitian feels like is right. And the athlete wanting this could be driven by wanting to have a different body composition to help with their sport, maybe wanting to get more speed or wanting to get more weight or strength that is required for their specific activity in their specific sport. Also, the sports dietitians can give very specific kind of like supplements to athletes, but it's a very specific and very small list of what they can actually give to them. For example, like iron, whereas other things they have to get on their own, but the dietitian can give them kind of like a reputable source to get the supplement from. And then there are some things that it is their responsibility also to tell the athletes what supplements are absolutely not allowed and are against NCAA rules. Also, speaking of kind of wanting to work on body composition, the dietitians are the ones who do the body composition testing. So there are a lot of different ways to test body composition, anything from like a small little bioelectrical impedance analysis to a bigger like a bod pod, which is like air displacement, or like a DEXA scan, which is like an x-ray. And at Alabama, all of the dietitians, or almost all of them, are basically now set where they are trained on how to do body composition testing. And so they do that with the athletes. They talk about it with the athletes, and that's something that the coach is not allowed to talk to any of the athletes about. Also, the dietitians will facilitate sweat testing with the athletes. And so I actually got to see this while I was there, which was really cool. And so that's another thing that they do to kind of see how much water they're actually losing so that they can make individualized plans for the athletes of like how much hydration each of them actually needs, like before, during, and after practice, as well as how much electrolytes. And speaking of, the sports dietitians actually go to a lot of the practices of the sports that they overlook. And this is for a few reasons. One of them is so that they can be kind of just in the space as the athletes. So if they're between drills or between sets and they want to ask the dietitian a quick casual question, then they can. Or if they want to ask them something about coming to see them in their office, they can. Or also it's for the dietitian to actually like watch all of the people practicing, and so they can see, is anybody getting fatigued early? Does anybody look like they might benefit from maybe eating a little bit more before practice or something like that? The sports dietitians will also go to meetings, both team meetings sometimes and also meetings that are like with the coaches, the strength trainers, the athletic trainers, and basically all of like the people that take care of the team. And they might talk about specific athletes, they might talk about the team performance as a whole, and basically what everybody in this meeting can do to make it better. And on top of practice, sports dietitians not only go to their practices, but they can go to all of like the home meets when the teams are competing in Tuscaloosa. Then the sports dietitians can obviously go to their meets, they can be at these competitions and watch them play. And some teams will actually take the dietitian with them to like away games, away meets, and things like that, which is really cool. And speaking of, the sports dietitians will also look at like the pre-game meal plan and kind of make sure that it's up to their standards, it's what the athletes need to be eating, and they'll see like maybe what restaurant they're going to if they're going to be away, or like what they have ordered to make sure that the athletes have enough protein and carb sources and options so that they can make sure that they're getting their energy needs before competition. And if you're thinking, wow, these are a lot of factors and they have a lot of things that they have to go to, this sounds like it could be pretty crazy variable hours that are really long. Well, you would be correct. And now that we've covered the responsibilities of a sports dietitian, I am going to talk about the day-to-day and that whole school hours situation. But before I do, let's talk about what responsibilities are not the dietitians and what sports dietitians do not do. And not only did I see this at the UA facility, but also in a webinar that we hopped on about nutrition operations for collegiate athletes. They discussed how crucial it is to make sure that everyone on the team knows that it is not the dietitian's responsibility to be like a food or snack or meal delivery service. And by that, I mean that, like I said, they like see what snacks need to be ordered for the different teams and like what they kind of want them to be eating and snacking on before practice. Well, each team has its own kind of like separate area in whatever building they practice in where they have their whole like snack station set up, whether it's bars, like applesauce, like whatever they have that's there, they have all these different snacks. And apparently it's somewhat common for sports teams or sports coaches to assume that it's the dietitian's job not just to order those foods, but also to transport them and restock them. And a lot of people also think that it's the dietitian's job to actually place the orders for the pregame meals, but it is not. After doing my internship, I completely understand why sports dietitians would not have any time for doing this. Transporting, delivering, and restocking the amount of food that these teams go through in a week would just be completely unreasonable to have a dietitian doing by themselves, because that is just so much time that would be taking out of their day, just again being a snack or food or meal delivery service. Like I said, dietitians have a lot of responsibilities and a lot of things that they need to do during the day, and if you were to add in that into their schedule, then they would not be able to get done any of the other responsibilities that they have. And this is why at UA, at least, they have the managers for each sport team, which are usually like students. They have the managers go and restock everything. And yes, the dietitians will see what needs to be ordered and fill out an order form, but it's the managers who actually restock everything. And leaving that to like 4 students who that's like just their job out of like the other things that they do makes it a lot easier and a lot more manageable to get that done. And it just makes more sense not to have the dietitian doing that. Okay, now that we've talked about what sports dietitians do, let's talk about what their day-to-day actually looks like and how many hours they work a week. So this is gonna look really different based on what teams you have, what time of year they practice, and what their meeting schedule looks like. And yes, this is not just a desk job. Like when I talked about all the things before, you're not just sitting at a desk all day, you are like out and about, walking around campus, walking to different places, and it's really a pretty active job, which makes it exciting. So in my experience and what I saw with my dietitians is that on lighter days of the week, so like when their athletes didn't have as many practices scheduled, there weren't as many team meetings scheduled, that's when they would kind of have their days open to take individual counseling sessions. And this can kind of vary because there are also some dietitians who their team is just kind of busy all week. So their situation is more of like they take 1 to 2 counseling sessions every day, just kind of depending, or they have to do a lot more of like kind of informal meetings based on how busy their schedule is. Now, what time they get there in the day depends not only on like when their first practice is that they want to watch, but also if they're checking a meal. So basically, right now, and I don't know if this is just because right now there's not really like a food service dietitian, but right now, basically all the dietitians are taking turns with checking breakfast and dinner, which basically means they're going and they're making sure that everything on the menus looks like what is actually being served and that nothing needs to be like changed or modified or like taken out. So if you were going to be checking breakfast, then you would have to get there pretty early in the morning, or if you were checking dinner, then you would have to make sure that you're staying until a little bit later in the day. This, as well as practice times, team meeting times, and pregame meal times, is going to determine when you're there throughout the day and how long of the day you're there. And again, what I found is that how many hours a week a sports dietitian works kind of depends on what teams they have and what time of the year those teams are in competition season. So for example, the dietitian that I was with, she had 3 different sports and they were all spring sports. So right now it was like the busiest time of the year for her, when she is working probably well over 40 hours a week, just working around the clock, having to go to different practices, having to like leave, go home, and then come back to be like at a night game, or like, you know, the people who are on basketball are having to come back. Basically just a lot of hours right now. But the perk is she does not have any fall sports or any summer sports, which means that during those like summertime, especially because that's right after when they get done with their competition season, summers are really pretty light for her. So she barely has to be on campus or coming in to work at all. And so the thing is like you're getting a salary paid around the year, but it's just going to be that some chunks of the year is going to be when you're going to be really putting that work in, and then the other times of the year it kind of makes it up when you're not having to work as many hours. And this is not always true, because you could have some dietitians who have kind of different teams that do all year round. Like you could have, you know, a spring team and then like a fall team, and so maybe you just kind of, it's evened out and you are just working like 40-hour work weeks every week. It just kind of completely depends, and it depends on like how hard of a worker you are, how well you're able to get your stuff done and then go home, and like how efficient you are with your time. So basically what I mean is that what you do in a day-to-day as a sports dietitian completely varies, what you do week to week completely varies, and what you do at different months of the year completely varies. But that's kind of the fun in it all. And my preceptor, for example, like she was doing clinical before this, and she decided that that was just a little too boring for her. She wanted to do something exciting, so she tried sports, and exciting it is, because like I said, you never know what's going to happen. You never know what problems are going to arise. And it's basically just like a game of like catch up and going to different things all the time, which honestly was really fun. So that was what I witnessed all the sports dietitians doing, and what they told me that they do not only here, but like what responsibilities they have and do at other facilities that they worked at before. So now that we've talked about that, let's talk about what I did as a dietetic intern. So if you are thinking about doing a sports internship, or you are just interested in it, maybe you're about to start your sports dietetic internship, this was my experience. This is what I did in my day-to-day, and yours might not be the same, but maybe I can give you a little bit of insight into what it was like. So the first thing that I did on my very first day, and what I did a lot of the days that I was there, is I spent at least a couple hours in the smoothie bar that was in the weight room. And the UA facilities are literally just so amazing to be in. We have a massive weight room. It's so incredible. And in that weight room, we have a smoothie bar that is built in. And now the busiest time for this smoothie bar is definitely during football, because during football, each guy on the team has a very specific smoothie that is made the way that he likes it to be made. Whereas for the other sports, they just kind of make like a mango pineapple smoothie for everybody and mix up the flavor. But for like the football team, they each have their own specific flavor that they like to be made. Some of them have the same, and it'll be specific for like 4 guys, so you can make the same for them, but everybody else is pretty individual. So my preceptor put me on the hours of football because that's when they needed the most help. And honestly, I enjoyed it. Like, I'm not somebody who really likes making smoothies, I guess, but it was actually pretty enjoyable to put all the components in. It kind of made the time go by quicker because I was like doing something. I felt helpful, and I got to actually watch the football players and like the different sports practice in the weight room. And that also made the time go by quicker because it was interesting to just see what types of things that they were doing specific to their sport and like their needs and their athletic ability. And besides that, I also went with my preceptor to the sports that she was in charge of. We went to their practices and their weight room sessions. So I got to go to the weight room at different times of the day, but just watch instead of be making smoothies. And we basically watched the different girls, or like whoever it was, we watched them train in the weight room. And we also got to go to specific practices. So like gymnastics practice, volleyball practice, which was really cool to watch. I also went with my preceptor to the different facilities, like where each sport practice, to, like I said, look in like their snack room, like their food room. And that's when she would kind of like look around and be like, okay, while we're here, while we're watching practice, let's see if there's anything that needs to be ordered, anything that needs to be put on the list. And sometimes, I think one time we reorganized because we ordered a bunch of stuff because they were about to be at like a weekend long like competition series. And so we had to pack up a ton of snacks and kind of reorganize and see what we had. But that was the only time that we were really restocking snacks or like kind of like dealing with the actual food, because other times, like I said, it's the managers that do that. I did also make some really fun pre-meet hydration drinks for some of the teams, which was fun. So I got to put some like edible glitter in there and like make a fun little thing with whether it was like drip drop or whatever kind of like electrolyte drink mixed with like some water and some different flavoring. So that was also really fun. I also sat in on a lot of meetings. So I sat in on some team educations that my preceptor gave and other preceptors gave. I also sat in on some individual counseling sessions, which was cool. And I sat in on a lot of DEXA scanning and a lot of talking about the DEXA scan results. That is what I saw the most of, and what I feel the most confident in being able to do myself. Like after doing that, I feel like I could pretty easily. If you gave me the results of somebody's DEXA scan, I feel like I could like tell it to them and talk to them about it, because I saw a lot of that. And the most thing that I did was I made a lot of materials and handouts, like a lot of them. And I think this was just because like this is a good kind of task for an intern, and it was actually beneficial because some of them were like sports specific, and so I got to do some research into like the best things for different people to eat like at different times and like when they're working out and stuff like that. So I'll actually like show you guys some of them that I made on the screen. So some of them were like what to eat on your period, like during menstruation. So I talked about that, and I also talked about like bloating and things like that. So I did some research, which again, like actually don't follow any of this because this is all specifically for athletes, not for like general people, but this is like an idea. And also it was interesting getting in a different mindset of like having to make materials for athletes versus other people, because the general population has hypertension and we don't want them to have a lot of salt intake. Athletes, on the other hand, are sweating their butts off every day and they need more salt and more sodium in their diet. So kind of having like a reframe of my mind of like general population to sports was also a pretty big switch. I also made a handout on cold weather hydration, and this I actually presented to an entire like 76 person team, which was pretty cool. So I got to do and present that and talk about that. I also made quite a few like save the dates for different cooking demonstration classes, and so the one that I actually got to see, which I'll show y'all, the handout that I made for it, was the make your own guacamole demo. I was really proud of the theme for this. I was really proud of my little like what I did. I thought it was super cute. And this is another thing where I was like, okay, the main ingredient is avocado, and my preceptor wants me to talk about the best times to eat avocado in relation to sports and sports practice. So I had to kind of see like when is the best time to eat healthy fats and like how those are stored. They're stored, obviously it's like long-term energy, whereas like carbs is short-term energy. So that was also really cool. I also did a body positivity educational handout, and also I made handouts for all the big major like food groups or like macronutrient groups, and basically just examples of those foods, because sometimes it is easier to be like, okay, you need to eat more healthy fats, and then it's like, okay, well, what's a healthy fat? So you can just give them a quick handout, and then they can be like, okay, cool, I'll take from this list and know to add one of these like at every meal. And I even got to do a full PowerPoint presentation on like weekend nutrition, which is basically like the dining hall is closed on the weekends, so I got to do an entire PowerPoint on like how we're eating on the weekends, taking care of that even when it's not competition season, and that was also pretty cool. And I presented that when it was like a 20-minute presentation, which was awesome. And I also got to go to just basically like some meetings with all the head dietitians, which was cool, see what they talk about in their group meetings. And I got to spend some days with some other dietitians that weren't my preceptor, so I got to see like other teams practicing and other teams doing their thing, which was really awesome. So that's what I did as an intern. And now let's talk about what it's like to actually become a sports dietitian and the steps that you have to take to get there. Because something that I did not know before doing this internship was that there are actually a few more steps to becoming a sports dietitian than there are to a lot of the other career opportunities for dietitians. Basically, what I learned is that after passing the registered dietitian exam, so you become an RD, you then basically have to do 1 to 2 more years of internship in an actual sports facility. And this is kind of called also like a fellowship. So I remember it was so embarrassing. Like one of my first days, I met 2 other people who were working there who seemed my age. And I was like, oh my gosh, hi, like nice to meet you. We were talking and they said they were interns. And I was like, oh, I'm an intern too, whatever. And then I quickly realized they were like, oh, well, we're dietitians. Like, and I was like, oh, you've sat for your exam? And they were like, yes. And that's when I was kind of like, wait, computing, like you're interns, but you sat for your exam. Anyways, so that's when I figured out that a fellowship is usually required to kind of actually get into the sports dietetics world. And like that definitely is going to add another 1 to 2 years before getting a full-time job, which is kind of difficult to think about, but if you're really interested in this area, it can definitely be worth it. The other thing that I learned is that proven hard work and a good work ethic goes a really long way in this field. One of the reasons that they had me working at the smoothie bar so much is that that is like an entry-level position to kind of getting around the sports world and experiencing it. And apparently when people are hiring for for like sports dietetic fellowships after somebody becomes an RD, they would like to see that you've worked like at a smoothie bar or worked something else nutrition related in sports. So when I was working at the smoothie bar, most of the other girls that were working there were nutrition majors in different years at their time here at UA. And it was really cool to get to talk about them and talk to them about like how they found the smoothie bar and like what their goals are long term. And that was just really cool. But apparently, like if you're interested in sports dietetics, see if your university has anything like a smoothie bar or anything related to athletics that you can either volunteer at or maybe even like get paid to like do a job with. And that would be really beneficial if you're actually serious about wanting to do sports. And the last thing is that being comfortable and being used to being around sports is pretty big. For example, even though that I had not worked at the smoothie bar before, I did work a job tutoring in athletics. So I had worked with a lot of the athletes before, not like a ton obviously because I don't have infinite time on my hands or on my schedule, but I had worked with quite a few of the athletes before, and that meant that I had already had extensive confidentiality training and also just training on like how to interact with athletes, the serious rules that they have against employees dating athletes, obviously, how you can't sports gamble, and all the other important things in this realm. Like I think I sat through like a 5-hour training and left the room being so scared. I don't know why. I've never sports gambled in my life, but I was like, well, I better not do it now. So I had already gone under like extensive training about this and was kind of comfortable like talking to athletes. So at one of the many first interdisciplinary meetings that I went to, when again, it's like the dietitian, the coaches, the trainers, a lot of times when I would first walk into the room, like before anybody knew me, the coaches and everybody else were pretty apprehensive, and they like looked at my preceptor and they were like, is she good? Like, has she signed confidentiality? Is she okay? And my preceptor, even when she was like, yeah, she's like signed everything, she's good to go, they would still be kind of nervous until my preceptor told them, oh, but don't worry, she already worked a semester like tutoring the athletes. So like she's been trained and she knows this. And immediately it's like they would all be like, oh, okay. And then they would be comfortable talking to me about like athletes, talking to me about the team, the performance, and talking everything else around me. So they kind of knew that I was a trustworthy person because I had worked in this field with this type of like clients before. So all in all, having things to basically show and prove that you are a hardworking individual with a really good work ethic and who is not starstruck by athletes or sports is a really good thing to have under your belt when you're going into trying to have like jobs with this, trying to get internships, trying to do like your 491 or your individual learning experience. That's all really important to have towards getting you towards a fellowship and towards becoming a full-time sports dietitian. So yeah, that is what I learned. It was incredibly epic. I had the time of my absolute life. I am sad that it's over, but also like happy that I, got through my second to last dietetic internship. I literally loved every second of it. Like walking through the halls, like they have like their trophy hall, because like obviously we're the University of Alabama, baby. We're decorated. Like we've won national championships. And like the hall that they have with like the rings and the trophies, like I would walk there on my way to go to the bathroom, and every single day without fail, I would literally be like, like, I am so lucky to be alive. That's what I thought every single day. It was so incredible, and I loved going and watching the practices. Like multiple times my preceptor was like, if you want to get out your laptop and do work, like that's okay, I just have to watch the gymnasts. And I would be like, are you kidding me? Like I want to watch them practice. Like this is so incredibly cool. And so I just think throwing yourself into it and enjoying every second and like really making the most of it is just like the best thing that you can do for an experience like this. And if you want to do a sports dietetic internship, really advocate to your program director. I think it's probably a little bit easier if you're just in like dietetic internships, because I think you can choose where you want to go. But if you're in a coordinated program like I am, really advocate to your professor and ask her to ask them about it and if it would be okay, because originally like nobody in our program has done a sports internship through the coordinated program. And originally, like last semester, I think 2 semesters in a row, I was supposed to do food service with UA athletics because I just wanted to do anything with them, anything, and I would have been happy. So 2 semesters in a row, it kind of fell through and I wasn't able to do my food service rotation with them. And so I told my director, I said, please, I said, if there's any way that I could work with them, like I would just love to. Like, I would love to. And so she got me basically a sports internship, which is a million times cooler than the food service one would have been. And I'm just so thankful that I advocated for myself and like asked her about that, because it ended up being just the coolest thing ever. I really hope that this was helpful to you guys. If you guys are interested in doing sports dietetics, if you're interested in doing a sports dietetic internship, or if you want to become a sports dietitian, I hope that this was helpful, kind of giving you a better idea of what I experienced. And it's going to be a little bit different than smaller facilities, because obviously, like, we are the University of Alabama and we are pretty awesome and pretty large. So it was maybe a little bit different, but I hope that it was somewhat helpful. And yeah, I just had the best time of my life. And now I'm excited to go into my last clinical rotation. I'm excited to share all of that with y'all. I'm hoping that I'll be less overwhelmed and frazzled than my last clinical rotation, because last time I think I posted like 2 vlogs and one of them was like me having a breakdown over it. So hopefully this clinical will be better. I've heard from some other girls who've already done clinical too that it is a bit easier. So yeah, I can't wait. I'm so excited. I'm having the best semester of my life. And yeah, I hope you all have a great day and a great rest of your week, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.